Big week this week in terms of what's happening in Syria. You were one of the few people who from the very get-go supported what the president was doing and saying, let's get out of there. Why were you right and everybody else was wrong on those first few days?
The Constitution was very clear. It gave the power to determine when we went to war by Congress. Congress is supposed to vote. It's supposed to be the most important vote we have. It's supposed to be a big national debate, and very important because we're supposed to value the lives of our young men and women, and we're supposed to not just send them willy-nilly around the world into the middle of wars without thinking about it. And one thing that a lot of people don't realize is our troops had been given the order for the last several years, if not forever. We don't shoot at Turkish troops, and the Turkish troops are given the same order. So the people who believe that somehow our non-shooting soldiers standing in front of 10,000 soldiers that they were not going to shoot at were going to be a deterrent, we're just not paying attention. But the president couldn't try to stop 10,000 soldiers with 50, so I think he did the wise decision by moving them out of harm's way.
Well, it certainly has been a big turnaround this week in that there seems to be a ceasefire. Things seem to be calming down, and even praise from the Kurds toward President Trump. So that all turned around pretty dramatically from what we were hearing in those first few hours and days.
Everything that the neoconservatives said, that it would be genocide for the Kurds, all of that was untrue. Turns out you're right. The Kurdish leaders have said that they have withdrawn. There's been no genocide. There's been no massacre. And I think the irony of this is that I think the Kurds still have a chance for some kind of semi-autonomous region, like a province that they have a certain amount of control over and can share the oil receipts. President Trump promised he would help them to fight ISIS, but we never made a promise that we would come and stay forever and create a homeland for them. So I think the irony of this is by stepping out of the way, we actually created a situation where people all of a sudden said, hey, maybe we should talk to each other and see if there's a peaceful way out of this.
We're going to talk about socialism and the theme of your incredibly valuable new book in just a moment, but I want to reference what happened to you last week. You were in California simply having lunch, and a couple of people came up and started screaming at you. What on earth was going on?
It was my wife and I, one other couple, and someone on my staff, and we're having lunch, minding our own business. There's only two other people in the restaurant. We're about a half a mile from the Reagan Library. We were just getting ready to appear before 700, wonderful California conservatives. Unfortunately, I think it's the last 700
of them there.
In California. Exactly, but it was a wonderful day, a wonderful crowds of people that are real conservatives. But these people tried to ruin our day by coming over, showing the middle finger at us, using profanity, yelling at us. And my question really to everyone is, they keep blaming incivility on President Trump, and yet the only people I see that are acting rude and coming up to people in restaurants and yelling and screaming are the left.
That's why your book is such a timely, important book, The Case Against Socialism. There are people, polls are showing that a majority of younger people under the age of 35 actually think socialism would be a great idea for America. What's wrong with that?
When you look at socialism, every time it's been tried around the world, particularly in the last 100 years, it's been associated invariably with genocide and famine. Whether it was Hitler or Stalin or Mao. I mean, most of our kids couldn't tell you who Mao was, or that 50 million people died from starvation when they collectivized the farms. But they do remember Venezuela. And only a few years ago, Bernie and most of the socialists in our country, Oliver Stone wrote these great movies, extolling how great Chavez was, the socialist leader, and how poverty was going down. Venezuela had more oil and still has more oil than Saudi Arabia. But today, there's starvation in Venezuela, the richest country in South America. The average person in Venezuela has now lost 20 pounds, while the Maduro, the head of the government now, has probably gained 50 pounds.
So when you hear people advocating that we need to be more socialistic, they always point out to Scandinavian countries and say, hey, socialism is working beautifully there. So what's wrong with that argument?
What we find when we look at Scandinavia is they have private property, private stock market, and interestingly, they have had lower corporation taxes than the United States for the last 20 years. While ours were at 35%, Scandinavia was averaging only about 21%. Now, with the Trump tax cuts, we've now come down to where Scandinavia is. But the other side will argue, well, they have all these free stuff, all this socialist goodies, free college, free health care, etc. But what you find when you look at it is it's nothing like what the socialists here are saying. The socialists here are saying only rich people will pay the taxes. In Scandinavia, the working class pays a 25% sales tax, and the middle class pays a 60% income tax starting at $60,000. This is still a pertinent question because Bernie and Elizabeth Warren are wanting to give Medicare for all, costs $40 trillion. We have to ask them how they're going to pay for it. And so far, Elizabeth Warren will not admit it. But the truth of the matter is the working class and the middle class will have to pay massive taxes.
Bernie has been pretty honest about the fact that he says everybody's going to pay more taxes. Now, they claim that for those additional taxes, they're going to be just loving their new health care. But what it does, it destroys the private health care system, meaning there's only one provider, that's the government.
Well, I think a lot of people are going to have to look long and hard at this Medicare for all because it means private insurance for none. And for example, there's a couple 100,000 union workers in Michigan who have insurance that's well worth over $20,000, $25,000 a year. It's good insurance. It's part of their negotiated package. They're going to have to give that up. But I think when they discover that the Democrats are going to take away their private insurance, you know, they've admitted they're going to take away your gun. Now they're going to take away their private insurance as well. When that comes out and when people really recognize that you're not getting free stuff from the socialists, what you're getting is a bunch of high taxes to pay for the free, so-called free stuff, I think people will reconsider.
Senator Rand Paul, thank you so much. And I want to say to our audience, be sure to get The Case Against Socialism. It is a must-read for everyone. And if you have a family member who's about to go off to college, this is going to be just the medicine they need to fight the socialism flu. It's already a bestseller on Amazon for a reason, and that's because it's so effective. Also, you can keep up with Senator Rand Paul at paul.senate.gov. Follow him on Twitter at Rand Paul.